Pointer. Pointer. Back is next. Okay. I always wonder why don't pointers use the middle finger? It would be much more, attention grabbing. Kasha. Okay.
We have you.
Sagt Heilige Gemara. Rabbi Shimon Oimer Afal Kishuv. Kishuv is also one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. My time with Rabbi Shimon. Where does Rabbi Shimon know it from? The Chsiv, turning on to today's daf, onto daf Samach. Mechashefa loy sechaya. The Machshaife zolman ish loschen leben. Okay. Uchsiv, and it says in the pasuk, Kol shoichev im behema moishuvas. That's immediately the next pasuk. And I think we could say the Lublina strikes again because this is Parshas Mishpatim, right? Uchsiv kol shoichev im behema moishuvas. So we learn kol sheyeshna bechlal kol shoichev im behem. All people that are included in the prohibition of kol shoichev im behema, which we know b'nei Noach are included in that prohibition. Yeshnoi bechlal machshefa lechaya. They're psukim one after the other. It's a hekesh. Because there's two psukim that are simultaneous, that are sequential. So let's have a quick look at Rashi, because Rashi looks at some gender issues here. Mechashev loy sechaya elatumas bebezdin ve'echad zecharim ve'echad nekevos. Mechashev loy sechaya isn't only for females; it's for males as well. Ela shedibra kosav b'hoiva shanoshim mitzuyos mechashvos. There's more witches that are spelled with a capital B than there are men. Okay, gewaltig. Sagt der Heilige Gemara weiter. Did I just say that? Rabbi Lezer Omer, Aval Klein. Rabbi Lezer held that there's also prohibition for Klayim, for a guy to do Klayim. And we learned on the Mishnah that what this means is it doesn't mean Klai Zroyim, and it doesn't mean Shatness. A guy is allowed to wear wool and linen. What it means is he's not allowed to mate two different species of animals, and he's not allowed to graft two different species of trees.
Yosy, just getting back to the Machshaifer for a minute.
When I say Machshaifer, I think about Udala.
When we say ish, in a pasuk, we mean ish, and then we need another pasuk to say, we say chol nefesh, and that includes everybody, right? But sometimes we take the male use as exclusive for a male. So why here can we just expand that to anybody?
That's a good question. It's a good question, but of course, how does Rashi know this? So what I'm thinking, is it possible maybe that we also learned that from the smichas? Kol sheyeshnoi b'chlal kol sheichev and behema yeshnoi b'chlal machshev loy sechaya. So maybe that also includes male and female, and maybe that's what Rashi means to say.
That's possible.
Maybe that's possible. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter.
But why would the Gemara say that's a hoiva? That's normally. But it's expanded everywhere. If you're right, it would say that it's a smichas.
So I'm not understanding what you're asking.
If you're correct, what was your answer? Because of the smichas issue?
No, look, you suggested that if it says it lashon nekeva, maybe it is only lashon nekeva.
Right.
Takadu that it's lashon zah. So I suggest maybe we also learn that from the smichas. And kol shoichev in behema includes both males and females.
So. That means right, because it says call.
Right. And Rashi just saying that.
So maybe the same way the smichas teaches us, the smichas teaches us that whoever is mitzvah in kol shoichem, why
didn't the Gemara say that instead of saying that it's a hoiva issue?
No, Rashi sticks in hoiva.
Okay, Rashi. Why didn't
Rashi says dibur akasav b'hoiva?
Right. So why didn't it say because it's a smichas?
No,
if you're correct,
it is a smichas. But Rashi wants to know why couldn't it just say kol mechashav lo sechaya? Why Taka didn't it say that way? Why didn't it say it in a generic term? The teretz is because the Torah indicates that most mechashefis are women. As a matter of fact, all mechashefis are women. Okay. Sagt Gemara weiter. Rabbi Lezer Omer Aval Aklayim. Minan Emili Amar Shmuel Damar Kra. It says in the pasuk Es Chukoisai Tishmeru. And where does it say this pasuk? So Rashi Kisha His or Yisrael b'Sinai. When the Torah told us at Sinai, Behem Techaloisar Biaklayim Pasach Behu Kra. How does the Torah introduce this prohibition? It says Es Chukoisai Tishmeru. It's actually Tishmeru. Es Chukoisai Tishmeru. Mashallah Pasach came b'Shar Makomis. This is not a typical way for the Torah to introduce a new halacha. Es Chukoisai Tishmeru. So since the Torah uses this unusual introduction, Shema Mina Hachi Ka'amar Lahu. This is what the Torah must be trying to tell us. Es Chukoisai, that I have already established in the past, meaning to the Bnei Noach, Es Chukoisai Shechakakti Kfar Livnei Noach, Tishmeru, you should continue to follow. The Eluhain, and what specific Chukoisai that I told you about as the Bnei Noach am I reminding you about now? The Eluhain, Behemtecha Loisar Biaklai. Aval Harisha Shor V'Chamor Lo Yisartim. We know a Yid is not allowed to use two different types of animal to pull a wagon, to pull a load. A goy is allowed to. The only prohibition that a goy has is actual breeding. So we know immediately Amar Shmuel Damar Kra Es Chukoisai Tishmeru Chukim Shechakakti Loch Kvar. And what are those? Behemtecha Loisar Biaklayim V'Sotcha Lois Sizra Kalai. So that's how we know that this was already in existence even before the Torah was given. Zok to Gemara, Ma behemtecha berba, just like the prohibition that applies to goyim when it comes to kalaya behema is harba, meaning you're mating two dissimilar animals. Av sotcha, the type of prohibition that Torah is referring to when it talks about v'sotcha l'sizra kalayim by a ben noyach, it's beharkava. It's also bringing two bodies so two together. Rashi uses ma behema b'harba davar hamasuyim al davar hamasuyim. You're bringing two things together. And then we learn more. Ma behemtecha, we know the isser of kalai behema. It doesn't matter if you're in Eretz Yisrael. Doesn't matter if you're in Chutz La'aretz, because Rashi is the chayves saguf she'init tluya b'chayves haaretz navkolon b'kedushin to the hagas afilu b'chutz la'aretz. Any prohibition that's not linked to the land applies everywhere. Bein baritz, bein b'chutz la'aretz, av satcha. So to the prohibition of grafting two dissimilar trees applies bein baritz, bein b'chutz la'aretz.
This shows Mitzvah Noach. This instead of one, or this in addition to Sheva Mitzvah Noach?
You want to know if Kalayim replaces one of the other ones on the list?
Yeah, or is it in addition? Is it 8?
We actually had in the Gemara, at least the Tanakh of Menashe took out Avoda Zara took out Mekalas Hashem and Dinim and put in instead Kalayim and Siros.
Oh, so it's still up to 7 then.
I think it's still 7. But we already learned that there's really way more than for instance, prohibition for a goy to be shovis, to rest, that's another one. But that it's not counted as one of the 7 because it's telling him to get up and do something. And the Sheva Mitzvahs B'Noach are things where we're telling him don't do something. So really the Sheva Mitzvahs B'Noach, there's more than 7. And it doesn't even mean 7, it means 7 categories. Each category includes many different. Dinim is a vast category.
Yeah.
Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. Frank to Gemara, so now you made up a new way to analyze a pasuk. That when it says, it means chukim that have already been in existence. Well, if you're going to open that up, that's literally opening up a Pandora's box. Why? Because there's so many places in the Torah where the Torah introduces a mitzvah with the following words. So that's the same structure as chukoisai that have already been in existence prior to this tzivui. Zok Gemara has a very big difference. Yes, it's quite common for the Torah to say ushmartem es chukoisai. But if it says ushmartem first, that means I'm first telling you about it now. If it says es chukoisai first, that means es chukoisai that I have already told you about, tishmaru, I'm telling you about once again. So Zok Hasam ushmartem es chukoisai dehashta. What am I talking about? I'm talking about hukim that I'm going to tell you about right now, following the ushmartem. But hacha by Kalayim, it says as chukoisai tishmeru. So the chukim are there even before the tzivu of tishmeru. Chukim demeikara tishmeru. So therefore, dafka by Kalayim and by dafka by Kalayim, do we have this rule that the mitzvah must have already been relayed to the Bnei Noach before it was given again to the Eden by Matan Torah. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha in our Mishnah tells us that when they were paskening on the person that was Mekalas Hashem, they didn't have the whole discussion about what actually was said because it's very inappropriate to repeat that. So they did it with Remez, Kill Yosy, Hika Yosy es Yosy. What daf is it on? I can't find it here. Yeah, it's on the Mishnah. Hamagad, if Anun Hey Amid Beis. So at the end of the Mishnah here, it says, oh, I'm sorry, it goes back to the Amid Beis. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, right at the bottom of Nun Hey Amid Beis. B'chol yoim danin asaydim b'kinu yaka Yosy es Yosy. And if you remember when we learned this, I spoke out that you see from the Mishnah that the Mishnah compares the name Yosy to godliness. Just saying, and I'm not trying to hint anything. I'm just telling you what Rashi on the Mishnah told us that that Yosy is a name that's similar to what? Yosy. Yeah, similar. I changed my name. You didn't hear? So Dr. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha said
because it has 4 letters. That's the Gemara.
4-letter word.
Yeah.
That's why. That's one of the reasons why Rashi says it's the same. It reminds us that it's the 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Kizok Amar Bacha Bar Yaakov. Einoi Chayiv Ad Sheyavorach Shem Ben Arba Oisios. You're not Chayiv unless you say Yud Kei Vav Kei, but not Yud Kei. Not Yud Kei. We actually had a discussion today. I thought maybe Shem Ben Oisios is Aleph Lamed. So someone said, no, the ArtScroll says it's Yud Kei, and he knows it from the Margolius Hayam, from a proof of Margolius. So I can't argue with that. Lafuki, that's right. That's really serious. Lafuki ben Shtei Oisios. The lie that if someone used that Shem, it would not be considered Megadif. It's not a mitzvah, but it's not Megadif. Frag Gemar Pshita, isn't that what the Mishnah says? Yaka Yosy is Yosy. Yosy has 4 letters. Zok to Gemara, Yaka Yosy is Yosy Tnan. The Torah said, the Mishnah said only a 4-letter word is also. Zok to Gemara, Mao de Tema Milsa Ba'alma Hu de Nokat. Maybe the Mishnah is just hopping on Yosy as an example, but not to be so precise to tell you that it has to be the Shem of 4 letters. Kamash Malanda, the Tana was very precise. Ikadamri, on the other hand, Amar Bacha B'Yaakov Shmami No. It's enough with the Shem ben Arba Oisios. Nami Shemu, and you don't have to use the long form name of a Kodesh Baruch Hu to be over Megadev. Frekmar Pshita, again, Yaka Yosy es Yositnan. It says 4 letters. You might have thought that you have to use the whole Shem HaMefarish, but Umilso Ba'alma Hu Denokat, and the reason why I hopped on Yosy is just an example, but not to indicate that it has to be 4 letters. Kamash Lon, that 4 letters is enough. So we know that 4 letters is enough, and we know that it has to be a minimum of 4 letters, right? That's what we learned. It's funny talking about swearing in 4-letter words. You see the edelkeit of certain people. The Mishkiach of the Philadelphia Yeshiva, his name is Rabbi Shroldik. He's a very, very special guy. He was one of the older Brachim in Yeshiva when I was there. Very, very special guy. And my son told me that when he lived in Philly, there was a group of boys that were using 4-letter words. They were swearing. They were using nibble peh. So the good group of boys went to Rabbi Shroldik, and they said, you give shmooze on a regular basis. There are Brachim that swear. We think you should address that in one of your shmoozes. So he starts to shmooze, and he says, it's hard to believe that Brachim are nichshul in Shavua Shov. Like it totally went over his head. Like it's such a feeling angefallen that people are using 4-letter words. He thought that Ben Brachim are they're swearing in Shavua Shov. Couldn't understand that. That's it's geschmack that there's such purity in the world. Zok Gemara weiter. Nigmar hadin. So the Mishnah said once they've established with clarity that this person said something that qualified as Megadev, then they actually had to hear precisely what he said from the Edom. So the Edom would have to now say exactly what he said. So the Mishnah says the Edom stood to hear that. I'm sorry, the Bezdin stood to hear that. Right. The Bezdin stood. So I'm the minolan. How do you know Bezdin has to stand when they hear this? Amar Yitzchak bar Ami, the Amar Kra. Ehud was, I believe, a shofet, and he had to kill Eglon. Eglon was a big fat pig, big fat chazer. And what happened is Ehud asked for an audience with Eglon, and he told Eglon, "I'm delivering the word of Hashem. I have a message for you from Hashem." And Eglon, this big fat chazer who was Melech Moav, a goy, had the respect to stand up to hear the words of Hashem. And what happened is Ehud said, "Let me tell you what Hashem wants to do." And he took a knife and smashed it into the guy's belly, and his belly was so big and fat, it sucked in the whole knife. So you didn't even see the handle of the blade anymore. So he couldn't even get it out. And shoot a good knife. And that's how Eglon Melech Moav was.
Yosy, when the Bezdin stand, is that halacha?
Yes, and we learned it from Eglon.
We don't learn halacha out from Nach. We're learning a ride from Nach here.
Maybe so. Let's have a look. A very good horror. So let's see what the Gemara says. I'm the minolan. I'm Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ami the Amar Kra the Ehud ba Elov. Ehud came to Eglon. Who Yosy b'Aliyas HaMikara. He was sitting in his beautiful attic in his penthouse suite. Asher loy levadai, his private sanctuary, his private study. Vayomer Ehud. Ehud told Eglon Melech Moav, Devar Elokim li elecha. I have a message from the Rebbeinu Shalom. Elokim, notice, is a kinoi. It's not Shem Havaya. Vayokom me'alakise. And the good Rabbi Chazer stood up from his seat out of respect for the Dvar Hashem. Frank the Gemara, Valadvarim Kal V'chomer. Ma Eglon Melech Moav, Shu Nochri, is a good Rabbi Goy. V'lo Yoda. Ela b'kinoi, and he only heard a kinoi of Hashem, not Shem Hashem Mamish. Nevertheless, Omad, he stood up out of respect for the Dvar Hashem. Yisrael, if it's a Yid, v'Shem HaMefarish, and he hears the Shem HaMefarish, Alachas Kama v'Kama, the Bezdin should have to stand up. So, Frank Peter, how could you learn halacha from a Maaseh Navi? So maybe Chazal Paskin, based on a sensitivity that this is the right thing to do. Is it a mitzvah d'oraisa? No. And a mitzvah d'oraisa, I agree. A mitzvah sasei d'oraisa, you cannot learn from Navi. But a hanhaga that Bezdin says this is how we should fear zich, we can learn it. Never mind from Navi, we're learning from a big fat Rabbi Chazer.
We have it on Yom Kippur. Everybody stood up to Shem HaMefarish and then.
Right, but the question is it a halacha d'oraisa that you have to do that? That's the question. So Peter's saying you can't learn a mitzvah d'oraisa from Navi. But lav dafka is a mitzvah d'oraisa. It's the hanag of how Bezdin fears it. Kairin. Then once they heard this horrible klala, they raised kriya. Minolan, how do we know that Bezdin rises kriya, or anybody would have to rise kriya when they hear a megadef es Hashem? The Chsiv, it says, now this is another fascinating story in Navi. Sanhedrin wanted to destroy the kingdom of Chizkiyahu, and he cursed him with alamina klulas. He said, "Sollst du wachsen wie ein Zwiebel mit der Kopf in der Erde." No, he didn't say that. He said something that was much more severe. He's megadef es Hashem, and he sent a messenger to deliver this message. And this messenger, his name was Rav Shakeh. So, Vayovoy El Yokum ben Chalakyo, Vishavna HaSofer, V'yoyach Banosov, Hamaskir El Chizkiyahu. They came to Chizkiyahu because they were the ones who received the vile message from Rav Shakeh. And they were going to tell Chizkiyahu what this message was. But they came Kurei Begodim. They came to listen. By Agidullah is Divrei Rav Shakeh. So how do we know that you have to rise kriya? Because you see, these messengers, as soon as they heard what Rav Shakeh said, they raised kriya. Loi ma'achin. When you rise kriya for such a horrible shmiyah, you're not allowed to sew back up. You're not allowed to repair it. Minolan, how do we know that? Amr Abavo, Asya kriya. We learned kriya mentioned by Rav Shakeh from the kriya that Elisha did when his Rebbe Eliyahu Navi died, or moved on. Ksiv hacha kurei begadim, referring to the messengers that came to Chizkiyahu. Uksifasam v'atita roya. Elisha saw that his Rebbe is flying away. V'umitzak avi rechav Yisrael parashav. He was crying.
Yeah, are you allowed to sew up the kriya for a velas?
No. Oh, you are by velas? You're allowed to? I thought you're not allowed to.
So he talked about it.
Oh, sometimes you are allowed to?
That's why this one is so special.
Okay. For parent, for sure you can. Maybe for other relatives. Elisha never saw Eliyahu again. Vayechazik bebegodov, Elisha grabbed his beged, vayikraim, and he tore him lishnayim kroim, into two pieces. Frag the Gemara. Mimashma shenemar vayikraim lishnayim. What did he ripped his beged into two? Into two what? Into two pickles? No, into two pieces. So why does the Novi have to be redundant? En yodeh shein kroim, umal tamaloimer kroim. Why do they have to say vayikram l'shnayim kroim? It could have said vayikram l'shnayim, right? So kroim is extra. Malamed shem kruim lo'olam. They stay torn forever. So that's how we know that kriya has to remain unfixed. Tanu Rabbanan. Echad hashemeya. The person who actually means the aid, who actually hears the megadik, the echad shemeya mipi shemeya, which would be the dayan, he hears a report from the shemeya. Chayiv l'kroya has to tear their begod. V'ya edim ein chayav l'kroya. When the edim come to relate to Bezdin what they heard, although Bezdin has to rise kriya, they don't have to. Shekvar koroi b'shasha shamay. Because when they heard it from the perpetrator, they already heard this giduf. Freik the Gemara, a big deal. V'chikari b'shasha shamay. My hava. Hakashamay hashta. They're hearing it again. So why shouldn't they have to rise kriya once again? That is not logical. The pasuk says, when the Chizkiyahu HaMelech heard from these messengers what the horrible curses that Rav Shekeh said, by Yikras Begadov, he tore his clothing. Who tore his clothing? HaMelech Chizkiyahu Kara, but the Heimloi Karu, only he tore. They did it. They didn't have to tear because they had already torn their begadim when they heard it from Rav Shekeh. If you hear a giduf, it doesn't just mean the Shem Hashem. Rashi says, Azkara means, Hashemeya Azkara means, Birchas Hashem. You heard a goy be cursed to Rabbi Shalom, Mipi Ha'ovid Kechavim, Einoi Chayev L'Kroya. Rabbi Yehuda ben Shmuel said, you don't have to rise kriya for a goy, only for a yid. I, Vim Taimer Rav Shekeh, they tore, when they heard Rav Shekeh, be Megadif, Zok Gemara, he wasn't a goy. Yisrael Mumar, and it's Pashit. It says Rav Shekeh. It wasn't Mr. Shekeh. It's Rav Shekeh. So if it's Pashit that they knew, he must have been a Yid. So that's why they had to rise Kriya. Zok Gemara weiter. He said another Allah. Ein karin ella al shem hamayuchad bilvad. You only rise Kriya if it was the Shem hamayuchad. Lafuke kinui deloi. If it was only a kinu like Elohim, then you don't have to rise Kriya. Zokt Gemara upliga de Rab Chia b'tervayu. Rab Chia argues on both of these points. A is he holds if you hear it from a guy, you do have to rise kriya, and if you're a kinu, you have to rise kriya. Why? How do we know Rab Chia argues on both of these points? The Yom Rab Chia, Hashemeya azkara bizman hazeh. If someone hears a megadev nowadays, einoi chayev l'kroya. You don't have to rise kriya anymore. Why? Because goyim are so lax and disrespectful, they use curse words every second word. Everybody would have begodim that are torn to shreds because they're constantly hearing goyim cursing. So let's analyze Rab Chia's halach. Miman, who are we talking about that you heard a curse that you don't have to rise kriya nowadays? If it's from a yid, mi pekiri kulahai. Is it possible to suggest that a yid would be so hefker in cursing the Shem Hashem? Impossible. That can't be what Rab Chia is referring to. Clearly, Rab Chia is saying if you hear it from a guy, because a guy, if every time you hear a guy curse Hashem, you're going to tear your beged, you're not going to have any begodim left. Now, the Ishem HaMeyuchad, if it only applies to the Shem HaMeyuchad, Migamiri, what goyim know the full Shem HaMeyuchad, they don't know. They know maybe they know the regular name for Hashem, but the long form they don't know. So you can't say that they're relaxing it and they're doing it all the time. They don't even know the name. It must be that what he's saying is if a goy who curses Hashem b'chinu nowadays, since it's so commonplace, we won't tear. But originally, when goyim weren't so hefker, you would have to tear even if you hear it from a goy. So that's disputing one halacha of Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel. And the Ishem Amiyuchat Bigiri Alav Bechinui Shema Mina B'Zman Ezehu Delay Homekar Chayv Shema Mina. So you see Saya Kinui you tear for and Saya Go you tear for, which disputes both points that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel.
Can I ask you, is that the Shem of 42 letters?
I believe so. I think the Shem Amiyuchat doesn't mean the Shem of 42 letters. I believe so. Zok Tehel Gemor Vayter Hasheni Omer Af Ani Kamoy. The second aid doesn't just say the whole klala. He says, "Me too," right? Me too. So everyone knows the famous story where someone met a Chinese person and he asked him, "What's your name?" He said, "My name is Jeff Goldberg." So they asked him, "How in the world do you have a name, Jeff Goldberg? You're a Chinese guy." So he says, "Well, when I was coming through the immigration, there was a large Jewish family that was right there before me, and the immigration person official asked each person a name. So the father said Jack Goldberg, and she said Rebecca Goldberg, and then they said Miriam Goldberg and John Goldberg, and then the last kid said Jeff Goldberg. And when they asked me my name, I said my name is Sam Ting. So they called me Jeff Goldberg. Sam Ting, yeah. I said Sam Ting, so they named me Jeff Goldberg. Amar Shlovish, Shema Mina, you see from here, Af Ani Kamoyu is kosher b'din imam and b'din nefashos. It must be that me'ikar adin, that is a proper Avoda Seidus, and you'd be able to kill somebody based on the aid saying, "I concur with what the first aid said." Lamaisa, we don't do that. Lamaisa, we learned, we examine individually each aid, right? We examine them closely. Why do we do that? Umaylahu the Avoda Rabbanan. It must just be a takana, a special takana to interrogate them much more. But me'ikar adin, they wouldn't have to. But for hacha, when we're talking about a megadef, even the loyevsher, since we don't really want to make everyone say it so explicitly, so we relied on the deraisa dakalacha that this is an acceptable form of Avoda Seidus. This Avodat possible. If you're going to tell me me'ikar adin, such a Avoda Seidus is possible. So how could you kill somebody? How could you kill a megadef with a possible Seidus? But you're going to willy-nilly kill somebody just because you don't want to make the aid say it? So it must be that it is a legal form of edus. Vashlishi oimer afani kamoyu. Who's this third wheel? Since when does forget him? Why do we even need him? Stomach Rabbi Kiva the Makash Gumalishnaim. Rabbi Kiva in the Mishnah says, not in our Mishnah, it says I'll be Shnai made him Ashleisha Edim Yakum Dover. And Kiva learns that three come together, they're one pair, and if one was Muslim, they're all Muslim. So they're all treated the same. So therefore he has to also say testimony, because if he doesn't, then we wouldn't be able to convict. Okay, that takes us to the end of the sugya of Megadef. Baruch Hashem, now we know exactly how to be Mekayim the Aveira of Megadef. Don't try it at home. And now we're going to get into the next exciting Aveira called Avodah Zara.
Don't try it anywhere.
I'm sorry?
Don't try it anywhere, not just
That's right. Agreed. Don't try it anywhere. This is all for academic purposes. You know, Dr. Phillipson writes a little blurb every week. He calls it Torah words. So I'm learning the Sanhedrin, and I'm scratching my head because really the whole Sanhedrin is a latzonos, because it's never going to happen. You in order to kill a guy, you have to tell him, do you accept upon yourself misa for what you're doing, right? So the guy's doing the avera, he's going to say, if you think I'm going to answer you, you're out of your mind, right? Why would I answer you, right? LMI, the whole system is a joke, because it can never happen. So what he was masber was very beautiful. He said the Goyish penal system is designed to prosecute, convict, and punish. But by us, the whole system is made to correct the not to do avera. We even learned, even if Chas Hashem, a guy gets killed, it's to give him a kapara. It's nothing. So the whole system is designed to help people avoid doing averas. Now it makes sense, not a gelechter anymore. Because if you look at it as a penal system, it's like a joke, right? The Gemara said if a peasant who kills once in 7 years are wild animals.
When somebody angry, he's so angry, I said, yes, congrats, I don't
know. That's already with two items are telling you that you have your life flashing in front of you.
No, but
and that's why attack with the Chicago Convention.
so yes, even if they know he heard them, right?
What's that?
But-
Yeah, even if they know he heard them, unless you hold like the Mandamer who holds that Hasra is only lahafkin b'chagig lemezit. But besides that shita, he has to say, I know I'm going to get killed, and I'm a kabel myself, Mises Besdin, and I want to do what I want to do. Who would
Yeah.
do that?
It'll never happen.
Zog to Gemara weiter.
Das ist doch daheim.
Zog to Gemara, ha'ovid avoidis kechavim. We're going to talk now about the Avera of Avodah Zara. Zog to Gemara. Echad ha'oived. An oived is one way of doing Avodah Zara. And Rashi says, what is oived? That's the general rule. What specific item is being referred to with oived? The Gemara will discuss. Ve'echad ha'mizapeyach. Somebody who shechs a carbon to a getchke. Ve'echad ha'makater. Someone who's makter on the mizbech. He puts the meat to burn on the goyish mizbech. Ve'echad ha'menasech. Menasech means to pour wine or water on the mizbeach. We'll soon see it also includes rikas adam. Now, there's really three categories of avodah zarah. Category number one is if one does the prescribed avodah that this specific getchka needs. Like about Ba'or has a very specific. I think the Baal Por is probably very busy on Motzei Shabbos, but it was a very specific type of work. The Markulis, you threw rocket, very specific prescribed things. So that's one category. If you do the prescribed avodah to any avodah zarah, you do the proper one. That's a chiv misa. Then there's a category of non-prescribed. If you do non-prescribed, then you're not chiv misa unless it fits into a rule. There's a general rule that there are certain avodas that are universal avodas. And the universal avodas, you'll be chayav for no matter which getchka you do it for, even if it's not their prescribed avodah. And the universal avodas are the list that our Mishnah just said. Mizabeach, Mekater, Menasech. Now, what do these three have in common? What these three have in common is they're avodas that are done bifnim in the Beis HaMikdash. That's what they have in common, and that's going to be a very important factor that we're going to have to make note of. And the echad ha-mishtachave. Mishtachave is a general, respectful gesture, but it's not in the same category as the three we just listed, because that's not necessarily done b'fnim. So those are the two. There's two types of general avodas that will be chayiv if someone does this on any getchke, no matter what their prescribed serving way was. Now, there's more. The echad hamakabeloi olav la'aloyha. If you accept this getchke as your God, and the oimerloi eliat. Now, these two things sound identical. So Rashi tells us two pshatim. In one pshat, he said, yeah, in fact, they are identical. Hamakabeloi olav la'aloyha. How do you do that? By saying ha'oimerloi eliat. Rashi's second pshat is that the chiddush is that you might think that when am I chayiv if I'm a kabel a getchke, if I'm standing in front of the getchke, they say I'm a kabel you. But what if I'm not there by the getchke? I stand and say I'm a kabel yen a getchke and yen a velt. I'm a kabel him as my God. Maybe that's not called a kabbalah salaka. So that's why it says I'm a kabel salaka means even if you're not there. But armalei eliata means if you are there. And it only says the second phrase to make clear that the first phrase is even if you're not standing right there. So these are all avodas that are osir, and that will lead to a chiv misa. But the following list, although they're osir, they don't lead to a chiv misa because they're generic respectful avodas, but they don't fit into the list that we're going to learn by darshaning psukim. Aval hamagafev, hugging, menashe kissing, mechabed is sweeping the floor around the getchke. Vamarabetz, if it's very dusty, people would spill water and that would settle down the dust. These are all things to make the environment look good. V'amarachetz, to give the getchke a shower. V'hasach, and to smear the getchke. This stone is so rough. Let's moisturize it, right? V'amalbish, if you get it dressed. V'amanel, if you put them on shoes. Oiver b'loisase. There's a loisase there, but there's not a chiv misa. What about hanoider b'shmoi? So Rashi says what noider b'shmoi means b'loshen neder. So someone said koinim alai kol perish ba'olam b'shem this and this getchke. If I take a shower, I'm makabel off my iser from this getchke to eat pears. Or v'amakayim b'shmoi, which is a shvua, Rashi says. Shvua, nishba metargim makayim. Nishba means to meet makayim. So again, over b'loisasa, but it's not a chiv misa. What about a poyer atzmai lebal poyer? He he serves the Baal Pa'or in the fashion that it's designed to get. Zui Avoidasa, and that also is a Chiv Misa. And same with Hazarik Eben Lemerkulis, Zui Avoidasa. Now it's quite scary because what is a Markulis? You know, when you drive up to Camp Aguda, you often see on the sides of the road, you see like two rocks with a horizontal rock. Rashi says that's Markulis. It's an Avodah Zorah Mamish. So it's two rocks vertical with a horizontal on top of it. That's what it's called, a nukshuk. It's Markulis. It's an often Avodah Zorah. How did you service this Avodah Zorah?
That's not Avodah Zorah itself.
That's what Rashi says. By throwing a rock at it. But Rashi says if you throw a rock at it, that's how you service it. Which is scary because you might be tempted to park at the side of the road and throw a rock at it. That's a mamish Avodah Zorah. That's mamish Avodah Zorah.
This is no. He likes the shine in front. That's not Avodah Zorah. You have Avodah Zorah. And the way
let's see Rashi. Let's see Rashi try. Markulis mitzadidin shalosh avodim. You take 3 stones. Achas mikan, the achas mikan, bachas milamayla al gabein. That's that formation, right? And that is the getchke. The current nice Markulis. This is Markulis. And then how do you serve it? Well, I do nice target practice. That's how you do it. But the last, it's very easy for someone going to Camp Aguda to stop at the side of the road and we're going to throw. That's mamish avodah zorah.
They have more than
what? They go higher. So it's Markulis on steroids.
Yeah, but it seems like what Roshi's saying is that you set up the Markulis.
Well, I can't hear him. He's talking. Give me a second.
You throw Wafterstein Arutzahaken the top in front.
It's like a bowling. It's like a bowling.
I don't. Ich bin nicht kein Mimche in der Luchas Markulis. But I know. But you're but verkaufen kein Kulis. Das ist eigentlich immer gesagt. What were you saying, Meyer?
No, I was just saying from Rashi, it seems like you set up the getchke, right? You take two stones, you put up a stone, so Markulis, right? And then you see a rock formation.
Then you take a shot on goal.
Putting rocks, like it's.
Yeah, it could be that's where rock and roll came from. Okay, Gavaldi.
According to art school, there's a mandamar. Even if you have constipation, as long as you just squat, you're over Balpour.
We're by Markulis already. We're next.
Okay.
If you're constipated,
I just read it.
Let's go kidney stones. Yeah. So you mischt daran das zwei Avodah Zorahs. Setit git vai. Oi, ich mach Markulis mit Por zusammen. Okay. Sag the Gemara weiter. There's a mitzvah to make fun of Avodah Zorah. So normally you don't make Lotzonos, but there's a mitzvah special to make fun of Avodah Zorah. Okay. Sag the Gemara weiter. Where are we holding? We're at the. I got so excited to my echad oived. So what avoida is the Tana referring to when he said echad oived? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah hachi kamar echad oived kidarka. So it was referring to the way to serve this avodah zorah. So if you serve the avodah zorah in the prescribed method of how it's normally served, that's right off the bat a chiyuv misa, and then the Mishnah lists off the general avoiders that are universal, that are machayiv you no matter who you're doing it for. Ve'echad hamizabeach, ve'echad hamakater, ve'echad hamanasech, ve'echad hamishtachave. And like we said, mishtachave is really not similar to the previous set of 3, because the previous set of 3 are avoiders that occur in the base of Mikdash. Ve'afilu shaloi kadarka, the list of 4, mishtachave, and the 3 avoiders, they are going to be chayiv misa, even if it's not the normal way to service those particular gadgets. Fragt the Gemara of Alichshev Nami Zoyrik, why isn't Zrikas Adam included in this list? It's also an avodah shebifnim. Amar Abaye Zoyrik Hainu Menasech. That's included in the category of Menasech because you find the Torah sometimes refers to Zrikas Adam as Nisuch Tichsiv Bal Asech Nichseem Gidam. Fragt the Gemara Minah Hanamili. Minah Hanamili, what? Rashi says, Minah Hanamili, the Mechayiv Bahane Avoidos Af B'Shaloi Kedarka. So there's 4 avoidos that we're now focused on, and that is Hishtach Avoya, which is the avoida even Shabachutz, and the 3 avoidos Shabafnim, which is Mizabeach, Mekater, and Menaseh. How do we know that those are universal avoidos that will be Mechayiv Samban Misa no matter what? The Tanur Rabban. Now, we already know the general prohibition of avodah zarah. We know it from Bnei Noach. We learned that already when we learned about it. when we learned about the Sheva Mitzvah of the Noach. But then the pasuk comes along and adds another pasuk, and this I believe is also in Mishpatim. So once again, the Lublina strikes again. Tezeveach leloi him Yachram, someone who shechs to avoid the Zara. Yachram means, Rashi says, a Mises Bezdin. It refers specifically to a Mises Bezdin. Bilti Lashem Levadai, we're only supposed to shech for the Rebbeinu. So the Gemara dashes the pasuk as follows. I mean, this is a brisa. Zeveach Yachram. If it would ilu nemer Zeveach Yachram, and it wouldn't have said like him, then Hayisi Omer, I could have attached this pasuk is not even referring to avoid the Zara. I could have said the pasuk was speaking about Zeveach Kachim B'chutz. If you shech Kachim out of the Beis HaMikdash, Yachram, you get a Chiv Mrs. Best. We're going to have a little bit of a problem with that because we know that's a Chiv Kar, it's not a Chiv Mrs. Best. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So I would have thought, if it wouldn't have said that, I would have thought Zeveach Kachim B'chutz or Kachim B'doyim. Talmud Loimer Lalahim to tell us that it's by Zeveach La'avoidus Kechava Makasim V'daber. The pasuk is talking about Zeveach. So here we have a pasuk that tells you that if you do Zvicha to any Getchke, that's a Chiv Misa. That's a Chiv Misa b'dei, right? So we have at least on Zvicha. But what about Haktorah? And what about Nisuch? Ainli ala b'Zeveach. Mekater u'menasach minayin. How do we know those avoid as well? Talmud Loimer, Bilti Lashem Levadai. You're only supposed to do avoid to the Rebbeinu Shalom, which adds to the klal rikain avoidos kulon l'shem hamayuch. It sort of clears out all the avoidus should only be done for the Rebbeinu Shalom, not for a getchke. Now we know there's a rule. We say it every day at the end of karbanos. Kol davar shahaya bechlal v'yotzim in achlal loyla atzma yotza ela ala klal kula yotza. Right. So we had a klal that said all avoidus are as also. And now Zevicha was pulled out and itemized separately. Why? To tell you that not only is Zevicha, it's everything similar to Zevicha. So it's telling me about the whole cloud. Not every avoida is osir. Rather, it's telling you only avoidas that are similar to Zevicha. L'vishiyat Zevicha lidoin ba'avoidos pnim. So therefore, any avoidas pnim, which are the three avoidas that the Mishnah listed, they're also going to have a Chiv Misa. That's how we know it. How do we know Ishtachava is not in this klal? Because that's not an avodah shevipnim. So how do you know that's also a universal avodah that's Mechayiv Misa? Talmud Loimer, it says in the pasuk, Vayelech Vayavoid Elohim Acherim Vayishtachu Lohem. So it talks about serving a getchka through bowing down. The Samach Lei in two psukim later, it says, Voitzeisa, es a ishahu. Let's have a look at the pasuk. Oh, it's a ishahi. Asher also as a davar arazeh. I just want to point out to David Zolti here, it mentions a man or a woman, right? Humankind, or people kind. El sharecha, es a ish, oh, yes, a isha, usekaltem, ba'avonim, v'mesu. I think
makes my point.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm going to learn from this pasuk because if you say people kind instead of being a woman, it's a kalten bavon and a mason. Okay. So Zok to Gemara.
Somebody who identifies as a woman. What happened there?
we will have to discuss that out of the scope of YouTube. Zok to Gemara weiter. Oynesh Shemanu. But we could for sure call him a Chashaifa. Oynesh Shemanu. We see from this pasuk the oynish, but there has to be a law for it. As Horabinain, where is there a law that prohibits as a universal avoida ishtachava? Talmud Loimer ki lois ishtachava la'elacher. So if it's now adding a avoida that's not bifnim, it's opening it up to a generic avoida like ishtachava. So maybe open it up more. Yochol shani marbe hamagafet v'amenashe v'amanil. And those are only allowed. Maybe those should be chiv mis as well. We go back to the klal of zeveach. Zvicha bechlal hoisa. Really, zvicha didn't have to be itemized. It was included in the general prohibition of avodah zara. V'lo meyotza lahakish elav v'lo melach mazvicha miyuchedes shi avodas pnim v'chayovin ala misa. Avkol shehi avodas pnim v'chayovin ala misa. That would exclude Ishtachavoya, which is why the pasuk has specifically mentioned Ishtachavoya, lidoin va'atzma, and Yotza Zvicha, lidoin ala klal kulei. So Zvicha is what determines the general avoidance in the klal that are going to be chayiv misa, and those are avoidus shebepnim, and the only renegade one that is independent is a shtachavoya. Now the obvious question is, who said that we use the extra zvicha to define what avoidus are, and then say shtachavoya is only for itself? Say shtachavoya is the guiding light, and it includes all avoidus, and we'll find a different drasha for zvicha, right? So that's that kasha we're going to learn today, but we're not going to get the teretz to it today because it's too far down on Samach Aleph. So hopefully, I don't even know if we'll get it tomorrow. Hopefully we will, otherwise it's going to be really confusing sugya. So we'll see tomorrow. Anyway, Omar Mar. Now let's go drill down a little bit and understand this brisa. It was a very long brisa. Omar Mar. Hayisi Omer, if it didn't say Zavech Lili Him Yachram, it just said Zavech Yachram, I would have thought that the pasuk is speaking about Zavech Kodeshim Bechutz HaKosef V'daber. But frankly, how could that possibly be? Yochram means a chiv misa, and we know Zavech Kodeshim Bechutz Karasu. It's not a chiv misa; it's a chiv misa b'dei adam. I mean, Yochram Rashi says means a chiv misa b'dei adam. We know that shchut chutz there is no misa b'dei adam. It's merely kares. Merely is not a good word to use. It's kares. Zok to Gemara, true, but Sol Kedai. If it wouldn't have said it like him, I would have thought Sol Kedaitach Amina. Ki Asrubei, if he's warned not to do shchutei chutz, then Yochra, then it's Ketala. And Kilei Asrubei, the pasuk that says it's kares is Kilei Asrubei kares. That's what it would thought. Kamash Malam Elokim, that's speaking about avodah Zara. And no matter what, warned or not warned, shchutei chutz is only a chiv kares. Now we have this kasha that we brought up a moment ago. Omalei Rava by Rav Chanan Labaye. I think Rav Beryl first is here. I just want to point out that this kasha, the moment we learned in the morning or the afternoon, the moment we learned this cold over Shet Makal, Moti jumped right away and asked us kasha. Jumped right out of him. So Moti was a step ahead. So Zok Gemara, Amalei Rava bar Rav Chanan Labaye. Ema pum verkehrt. Say Yotzei Shtachavoya Lilamed ala Klal Kuloi. And then we can include all avoiders that respect the avodah Zara. And says Zvicha is unique. You might tell me the chitema is aveach lomeli. You're going to tell me we can't do it that way because a shtachavoya we can say it's just for a shtachavoya, but zeveach we need to have a reason why it would have been listed. Why would zeveach have been listed alone if not to tell you a general category? You have to find something that zeveach is teaching you. Zeveach lomeli. So you might say, I'll tell you what you can use zeveach for. You can use it lugufei the mechashmin me avoida lavoida. What happens if someone is shechting an animal and he doesn't have in mind to shechting for avodah zara, but while he's shechting it, he has in mind that he's going to spritz its dam avodah zara. So the shechita was not avodah zara, and he didn't do the zrika yet. He just had in mind by the shechita to do the zrika for avodah zara. So where do we have such a similar concept? By pigel, right? By pigel, if you shecht, if the kohen shecht, or even the Yisrael, if the shochet shechts the animal with the intent of spritzing the blood, it passes a carbon. It's pigel, right? So you see such a concept that even though you're not doing anything wrong, but you're thinking in the future to do something wrong, it can mess the whole thing up, right? So maybe that's what you learned. Maybe you learned that the same concept applies to avodah zara, and that's what you learn from zeveach, because zeveach is shchita. That's the whole point. If by the shchita we don't need it to tell you that if you have kavanah to shech avodah zara, that's a chiyuv, because that we would know from shtachavoya. That shtachavoya is a very broad category; it includes only avodah. So why does it say zeveach? To tell you that by zeveach it's unique. That even if you're shechting not l'shem avodah zara, but if you had in mind while you're shechting that you're going to spritz avodah zara, that also is avodah zara. The itmar, we actually have a machlokes whether you automatically learn this chiddush from pigel. The itmar shoichet behema lizroik dama lavoidus kechavim or lahakter chelba lavoidus kechavim. So the shchit itself is 100% power if I want to eat meat, but you have in mind to do other things for avoidus. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asura. Rabbi Yochanan said, just like pigel asers a carbon, we actually learned from pigel that this would also aser, it's not a carbon, this would aser the animal. Very shlokish amar muteres. So zok to Gemara, hanichal Rabbi Yochanan. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who says it's asura, you can't say that I need zeveach to teach us this halacha, because I already know from pigel. So zeveach is extra, so I have to use zeveach to define what avodah zara is. Elul Rish Lakish, Boikra. So according to Rish Lakish, why don't we say that that's what you use Aveich for? And all avodas similar to Ishtachava are universal avodas that will be Mechayiv. Now, I feel very bad because I already caused you to lose a night's sleep last week when we had the kasha of whether or not dinim are included in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'Ninoyach, and we had a stira, and we didn't learn the teretz that same night. But hopefully the Olim had a good nap today, because tonight you won't be able to sleep because we're going to be torn about what is the halacha. Why do we learn it from Zvicha, not a Shachavoya? According to Rish Lakish, I could have learned it from a Shachavoya. So I apologize if you don't get a good night's sleep, but Mitchem, tomorrow night, Be'ez Hashem, you'll get a good night's sleep. Okay, I get
Also stark, das ist,
Those are the only three.
We're learning in the morning tomorrow's daf. So we're learning at 7 and at 9.
9, you're learning ours?
No, 7 and 9, we're learning twice tomorrow's daf.
right.
So either 7 or 9, you have to come both. And then at 8:30 at night, if Daniel's not back, we'll continue on from where we left off Thursday night. And we'll probably catch up, and then you'll be completely caught up.
Shkoyach.
What about Monday? It's a
No,
holiday.
Monday's a family day.
Yeah.
We'll have the schedule 7 to 9. Yeah,
9 o'clock.
yeah,
9 o'clock
same here.
down here.
Same place, yeah.
9:05.
I'll
Yeah.
share down here.
Yeah.
How's Daniel's grandson?
Unless you want to come downstairs at night. It's so much geschmacker. We have a whole studio. But the reason why I was upstairs is because that's where your Malcolm Kavu is.
So you're learning Monday morning also?
Yeah, we're learning Monday morning at 7 and at 9.
Yitzvach Yosy.
Did you hear about Daniel's grandson?
You look like you don't have snow outside.
No, we don't have snow.
No.
But you have white sand. We have white snow and you
We
have